Episode 5. Thalamus. The pain of rehydration was exquisite and absolute. Pores and capillaries which had ached for moisture were finally sated, though it was less painful than usual. Normally, he would have been in his position for weeks, even months on end, muscles and joints contorted in impossible positions simply to fit into a decent hiding place, or knuckles fixed rictus-like around an anchor point, hanging from a wall or ceiling like a malformed spider. This time he was laying down. Were the Neal sisters waking him up? Were all the previous events simply another failure in the biochemical cocktail that was supposed to make his long sleeps dreamless? That didn't feel right. He wasn't cold and burning at the same time, and there were nowhere near enough tubes in his body. Thalamus opened his eyes and sat up, and found himself looking into the face of someone he knew. He had never met them, never seen them in the flesh before now, but the sisters had bonded information into his mind, chemical and electrical signals pre-packaged to unspool, all upon receiving the correct signal from his visual centers. Her name was Diana. With that, all other pertinent information about her and his own situation fell into place, like keys fitting into locks. He stood, closing the distance between them in 3 strides. It wasn't so much that he wanted to kill her personally. It was more so that killing was how he interacted with the world in general. Violence was the lens through which he observed the only truth he knew. Survival was ultimately for the most fit. His intention was to grab her by the throat, collapsing her windpipe and using her DNA to override any security measures he came across. When he was within arm's reach, however, something stopped him. He sent the message to his hands, grab her by the throat until her face turns black and blue and her tongue lolls out of her mouth like a chunk of cheap rubber. Instead, he simply stood there. "How do you feel?" Diana asked. Her voice was kind, but it had an edge to it. "I am confused," Thalamus said. His voice, though rarely used, came out steady, if a bit quiet. "I'm trying to kill you." "Yes, I can tell," Diana responded. "Why can't I?" Thalamus watched as the woman decided how much to tell him. "I have resources. That is all you need to know." She considered him for another moment before continuing. "Rather than kill me, how about we try to get you back on task?" "What do you mean by this?" Thalamus asked. "I am going to release you from here. None of my people will get in your way. We will even provide you with transportation to go after your quarry. He's an escapee and a murderer, I believe." She looked him up and down, repulsed by the almost oiliness of his naked frame. Thalamus was impressed with this woman, able to talk with him so directly despite her obvious disgust. Usually, the only people able to do so were the Neal sisters themselves. What was it about her? "Why?" he asked. "Why do this?" "Consider it an apology. The man who ordered your capture was in the wrong," Diana replied with a shrug. "He was acting on a misguided attempt to honor a contract with a passenger, the passenger which you wish to kill." "Surely the trade agreements between Neal's Dome and you suppliers supersede all personal contracts," Thalamus said. "Trade manager Ingram would lead you into a conflict with us for the sake of a single passenger." "We take our contracts seriously," she responded. If the woman was shocked that he knew Ingram's name, she did not show it, though at times such loyalty can be a grievous mistake. "What has he to say about this?" Thalamus asked. What has Ingram III to say of the release of someone such as I? Nothing, Diana responded. And if, while you are about your business, you could make sure he does not say anything else, I would greatly appreciate the gesture of goodwill. You wish me to kill him? Thalmus asked. Yes, Diana answered. Are you surprised? Why would I be? Thalmus asked. Very well, he said, after several seconds of consideration. In the interest of keeping peace between suppliers and the Dome, I will take your offer. The Neal sisters will collect on this owed favor at their earliest convenience. While it pained Thalmus to leave the convoy without collecting more trophies, the priority of going after his target overwhelmed all other desires. Maybe once the job was finished he could come back and have some fun. Diana bowed, a brave motion in the presence of Thalmus, who was used to slicing exposed necks. May the ledger between us be balanced, Diana said, in a rolling and rhythmic voice that signified the sealing of a verbal contract. May our margins be in the black, Thalmus intoned, another packet of information prompting the correct response. He looked down at the woman, visualizing how easy it would be to kill her, to wrap his fingers around her throat and squeeze until he felt the crunch of cartilage and bone. What is the transportation you offer? He asked. One of our cars, Diana responded. It is called a Lancer, relatively easy to control if you need to, but one of our drivers will accompany you. No, Thalmus said. I go by myself. Diana looked at him dubiously. Are you sure? You've never driven one of our cars before. I have not, Thalmus replied, but I already know how. Diana seemed about to argue, then shrugged. A soft knock rapped on the room door. Thalmus turned like a cat hearing its prey, clenching his fists so that the bone plates on his knuckles came into readied position. Diana turned, opened the door, and stuck her head out. Thank you, Thalmus heard her say before turning back to him. The car is ready for you. She slid the door the rest of the way open and led him to the Skunk Babe's mobile offloading deck herself. They did not run into anyone else. In less than 15 minutes, Thalmus was speeding after his quarry. He was zeroed in on the 3D positioning map that projected itself over the screen of the car, Casey and Ingram's Lancer appearing as a red dot on the horizon. He felt the salivatory glands in his mouth begin to work in anticipation of the kill. The best part was gathering proof to bring back to the sisters. He would soon be satisfied, his urges quieted until his next awakening. Ingram. From on top of a rig, the rolling landscape that surrounded Lavina appeared flat. This was an illusion. In reality, multitudinous craters and sinkholes were hidden beneath mounds of loose dirt and soft mosses. Each was wide enough and steep enough to bend an axle or swallow a vehicle whole. Navigating through such terrain was usually a low-risk task for rigs like the Skunk Babe. Trundling forwards on house-sized treads, they rode over all but the largest of such barriers with ease. To any of the smaller vehicles, however, such as the Lancer in which Ingram and Casey currently rode, it was an area that required a mixture of skill, experience, and patience to navigate safely. Ingram cursed as the steering wheel once again wrenched itself out of his hands, the Lancer bucking like an enraged beast as it crashed headfirst into yet another pit. The damn machine fought his every intention. He told it to go left, and it went right. He told it to go around the 9-foot hole, and the damn thing drove in nose first, as though pulled by a magnet. Why the hell didn't you just get someone else to drive? Casey asked through his hands, both of which were holding his newly bleeding nose. Because you don't know how suppliers gossip, Ingram snapped as he wiped the sweat from his hands onto his shirt. The ins and outs of who I do business with would go around the convoy like brush fire. Once again, he grabbed the wheel, navigating the Lancer out of the ditch and back onto its projected route. Casey grunted in annoyance, but didn't argue any further as he tilted his head back and applied pressure to the bridge of his nose. It isn't as though we could call for a new driver anyway, Ingram thought grimly. Any driver would have to be sent via one of the convoy's dwindling helicopters, which was out of the question. They were already in Lavina proper, directly under the belly of the city's perpetual storm. Unpredictable bolts of lightning alongside sudden downdrafts of gale-force wind would spell destruction for both equipment and pilot. Thankfully, such disastrous weather patterns generally manifested too high up to be a threat to anything on the ground. The city rippled around them like a bioluminescent creature lurking at the bottom of some Stygian ocean, the tower's rain-streaked sides reflecting each flash of lightning thousands of times. Even after 15 years of regular trade with the city, it still made Ingram's head hurt. As they drove on, the towers became less complete. The scene was a cyclopean anatomy lesson. Support beams and metal frameworks showed through gaps in the atomically smooth sides, while systems of wires and tubing flapped wetly in the dim light of the approaching sunrise. "Why are they all broken like this?" Casey asked. "Did the storm do this damage?" Ingram shrugged. "Maybe. But it's most likely the corporates doing it to themselves, sending out caretakers to sabotage their rivals." "I thought the corporates worked together to keep each other in power," Casey replied. "It seems like that would be the most stable." He was cut off as the Lancer went straight into another ditch. "Son of a bitch, goddamned!" Ingram let the words fly in a fury barely less intense than the storm outside, as he once again navigated the vehicle out of the pit, his hands gripping the wheel as if welded there. "You're right, for the most part," Ingram said once the Lancer was back on its route. "The corporates don't go into open war with each other anymore. They fight more subtly. Lost repair orders, missing shipments of necessaries like food or fresh water, blocked pressure release valves, well-placed pipe bombs." Ingram risked freeing one of his hands to make a rolling on and on gesture as he spoke. All, of course, easily blamed on rogue slummer elements who have no association with anyone important. "I see," Casey said, frowning. "And now I'll be in the middle of it." Ingram didn't respond. What could he say, after all? Casey was right. He hid his concern at seeing the Adarak towers in such a state, even this close to Thornhill territory. He'd seen reports of the Adaraks losing ground over the last year, but had chalked it up to overexcitement. Despite their smaller size, Adarak had been the power in Lavina for longer than Ingram had been alive, their research and development outpacing rivals to the point where their systems and tech were the framework on which everything else in the city was built. They had seen the rise and fall of dozens of competitors over 2.5 centuries of Lavina history. This left many eager to see the giant fall, their slightest hiccup reported as an earthquake. For a moment, a hint of doubt tickled Ingram's thoughts, Dai's words about the Thornhills preparing a move to take over the city echoing in his mind. Ingram remained silent the rest of the way as he forced the doubts out of his mind, nearly avoiding several more pits but always just managing to slam home. Eventually, he aimed for one tower in particular, a titanic cylinder so tall that he could not see the domed glass top. It was one of those hit by whatever wave of destruction had roared through the area. A massive door loomed, open to an inky blackness so thick it nearly bled to the outside air. "I feel as though I'm about to be digested," Casey said, voice hushed with terror. "It's opening up its stomach like a starfish." "A star what?" Ingram asked. "Nothing, never mind," Casey said, correctly assuming that Ingram did not want a miniature lesson on extinct echinoderms. As they passed the threshold, light erupted from dozens of feet above their heads. The ceiling was the bright robin's egg blue of a summer day, complete with black outlines of long-dead birds soaring above. Trees and other greenery, though withered from exposure to the storm raging outside, grew from nearly every wall. "What do you think, now that you're inside?" Ingram asked. "It's beautiful," Casey responded. "I can see why they wanted someone from the dome. This much green must require a horde of geneticists and engineers, not to mention the raw materials and nutritional packs." "They're not real," Ingram said. "Holograms, all of it. Not a single honest-to-goodness thing growing in here." "But they look wilted," Casey protested. "Holograms don't wilt." "The Adiraks build for realism," Ingram replied, his grin widening as Casey's face fell. "Hey, cheer up, Case. Now that you're here, the Adiraks will be able to do things more like what they got under the dome. Real green growing all through their towers. Their worth in the city will go up, and consequently, so will yours." He reached across the console to pat Casey companionably on the shoulder. "Good to have friends like me, huh?" The road they were on appeared to be a flat, straight line, but this was simply due to its size. In reality, it curved, spiraling ever upwards along the outermost edge of the tower. The occasional torn panel revealed an ever-widening landscape as more towers became visible around them, and the sound of the wind and thunder of the storm outside grew. Ingram finally pulled the Lancer to a stop. "Now we wait," Ingram said. "Wake me up when they get here," Casey replied, settling back into his seat and closing his eyes. "Before you fall asleep, there is something you need to understand," Ingram said. "We're offering something that's too good to be true. One of the Dome's genetic freaks, as well as you, a Dome defector. Each of you by yourselves is something so outrageous and unlikely that the corporations have offered egregiously large bounties. Because of that, this is a situation where saying the wrong thing will get us executed on the spot. Keep your mouth shut, and let me do the talking." Casey made a few false starts before being able to reply. Finally, he said, "You made it sound like you trade with them regularly. How is this so much more dangerous?" "I do trade with them regularly," Ingram said. How was Casey not getting this? "Here, paranoia is a way of life. You might be what the Adiraks are looking for. You might also be a nifty work of sabotage sent by a rival or even the Dome itself." "The Dome doesn't send people out," Casey cut in. "They sent someone after you. I'm a special circumstance. Under normal conditions, that kind of thing would never be done." "Whatever you say," Ingram replied. "Point is, if we fuck this up, we'll both be roasted alive. I'm not using hyperbole. You ever hear of something called the Brazen Bull?" Casey hadn't. Ingram assured him that he did not want to. Casey. A vehicle rolled into view a little over 3 hours later. Ingram called it a pod. To Casey, it looked more like a rolling coffin. The tires were nearly as tall as the roof, their treads studded with metal knobs as large as his fist. It had no windows, just overlapping plates of metal welded together. "Took them long enough," Ingram grumbled to himself. Then to Casey, "Do exactly what I do." He opened the Lancer's door and stepped out, placing both hands on his head. Casey did the same, making sure to keep Ingram in his peripheral view. As they stepped into the Lancer's headlights, its doors closed automatically and disappeared seamlessly into the body of the machine. After 10 or so paces, Ingram went to his knees. Casey did likewise. He ignored the impulse to wipe sweat off his hands as the Adirak coffin grew closer. Though not as big as one of the rigs, it was a rhino to the Lancer's antelope. It stopped less than 5 feet from them, a hatch on its side sliding open to let the occupants out. At first, Casey could see only silhouettes. There were 5 of them, all the same height. As they drew closer, Casey saw they were completely identical. Each wore the same black body armor with a stylized letter A blazed across the left side of their chest. Their faces were hidden within helmets that had reflective face shields. Casey only saw 5 copies of his own tight-lipped reflection. All but one carried the same weapon, a bulbous, long-barreled rifle. Casey had seen these guns before. The Dome's museums held pre-Inferno relics that were either too rusted or too mangled to be anything other than scrap. They had never felt dangerous. These guns radiated death, each able to concentrate a beam of thermal energy hot enough to atomize skin and bone. The one who didn't hold a weapon carried a hand-sized book, open as if reading while out for a walk. "Hello, boys," Ingram said. "Glad to see you could make it." The people did not respond, Ingram's words falling flat like a lead weight. "What's with the stony greeting?" he asked. "I've held up my end of the bargain. See?" Ingram held out his hands, presenting Casey as though he was somehow the grand reveal at the end of a performance. Ta-da! They didn't respond. One of the armed caretakers aimed their weapon. It wasn't exactly pointed at Ingram, but it wasn't pointing anywhere else. The one without a gun opened their book. Their tome, Casey corrected himself, the word popping into his mind from somewhere. They began to read from it, speaking in a low voice. It was like the call of a long-dead songbird combined with the deep thrumming of a steel cable under tension. The tome glowed an insistent orange. The caretaker then asked, "Do you know what is happening in Old Town?" "I know rumors, but nothing solid," Ingram said. "My friend here knows nothing." The tome's light turned from orange to green. "I thought we were past this whole armed interrogation thing," Ingram commented. "You must be having a hell of a time." "You have no idea," the tome user responded before turning to face Casey. "It's your turn. Please answer my question honestly, or you will be shot." Casey nodded. Before the caretaker could say anything, however, a thunderous staccato split the air. Casey looked around wildly, the noise seeming to come from everywhere at once. A burst of rubble exploded within the tunnel, the greenery around them flickering and going out at the same time as the lights. Red emergency lighting flooded the vaulted space, casting shadows like spilled blood. Something had come through the outer wall, knocking Casey off his feet. He looked up, peering through the clouds of dust and the sporadic incandescence of Atarak heat weapons. Something even larger than the pod was scuttling through the half-light. Casey got the impression of a titanic spider, lumbering yet stupendously agile on multiple jittering limbs. "Casey!" Ingram screamed, his voice audible over the echoing thumps of the machine. "Get down!" No sooner had he yelled this than a wave of heat passed over Casey's body. A second later, a shockwave followed, launching him from his feet and sending him skidding across the floor. When Casey finally stopped moving, he tried to take a breath but couldn't. The air had become thick, languid and sickly sweet. Around him, muffled sounds and fuzzy lights danced and played with each other. Something hit him in the back, and for a moment Casey thought he had been stepped on. But the ground was moving under him. Slowly, he realized that he was being dragged. The air grew less heavy, his lungs working overtime as a coughing fit racked his body. At last, he stopped moving. Hands pushed into his diaphragm, causing him to cough one final time as air once again rushed into his lungs. Casey came fully back to himself, looking around. He had been dragged back behind the Lancer. Ingram was crouching over him. "What the fuck is going on?" Casey asked. "One of the other corporations sent their own people, most likely Thornhill," Ingram scowled. Looks like news of your survival got out after all. You're in high demand. Stay here unless I tell you to move. There's still a profit to make, but not if you get killed. Ingram left. The air was a thick chowder of toxic chemicals and overworked air purifiers. Casey held one of his jacket sleeves over his mouth, trying to breathe as little as possible. As he lay there, once again helpless and waiting for Ingram to save his ass, he saw them. Olivia and her daughter. His daughter. She was saying something to him, but he couldn't quite hear what it was. The rest of the world disappeared, fogging over like warm glass against the cold until only they could be seen. What was she saying? "Don't," Casey said weakly, trying to add sound to the movements of her lips. "Don't go." "Casey." Another voice cut in. At first, he thought it was his own. Shocked, he looked around, trying to see who was there, but the image of his dead lover and child stayed at the center of his vision as though projected directly onto his retina. "Who's that?" Casey asked. He felt an imminence over his left shoulder. His body went taut, each muscle contracting into a full-body cramp. He couldn't move, couldn't blink or breathe. All he felt was the presence pushing up against him, like a glacier made of the continent's softest down. Something that felt like a hand but wasn't gripped his upper arm, wrapping around it and squeezing. He felt the rhythm of his own frantically beating heart throb painfully against the implacable pressure, a blood pressure check gone utterly wrong. "Once again, you find yourself in the half-light of my domain," the voice said. Casey's body thrummed like a plucked guitar string. "Who are you?" he asked. "Let us talk, you and I, while we have the chance." The voice was soothing, like a caress. Casey was suddenly flashed back to his childhood. He was small, held by someone much larger. A feeling of utter safety enveloped him like a hug. "I believe we can help each other. Reach into your left pocket and take out that which you stole." He did so. His numbing fingers grabbed onto something rectangular. He pulled it into the open. His eyes widened. In his hand were the artisan genetic notes. Had he stolen it? When? Why couldn't he remember? The voice once again spoke. "Hold this tome to your heart. It will be a witness between us." Casey did as he was told. The buzzing of flies filled his ears, blocking out all other sound. You have been listening to Dead Arcology, written and recorded by me, Michael K. Ostis. If you enjoyed this story, please consider sharing it. I have episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podbean, as well as several others. Updates, schedules, and news can be found on the website, deadarcology.com, as well as on the social media apps Blue Sky and Instagram under the username Dead Arcology. If you want to help Dead Arcology grow more directly, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Dead Arcology. Thank you again for listening. It really helps a lot. I very much appreciate you giving this story your time, and I will see you in about 2 weeks. Goodbye.